from the CyberHub bunker and studio. You're tuning in to the CyberHub podcast, Tech Corner. And now, join me in welcoming your host and CISO, James Azar.
What's up, Veteran November, folks? How are y'all doing? I hope you're having an amazing day. This time I'm bringing a very, very special veteran. He's from across the pond, so if we have any audio issues or video issues, if you're watching us on YouTube, I do apologize. I blame it on the dolphins. Dolphins are evil, maniacal animals that disrupt our fiber optic lines, undersea fiber optic lines with their sonar. There's science behind it. I promise you, somewhere, someone's going to listen to this and start a research and prove me to be true. But joining me today is a fellow CISO, Yousif Ashaa. Yousif, welcome to the podcast. How you doing?
Yeah, really good. Thank you for having me on, James.
I'm very excited to have you on because you're the first British veteran I have on this month. And so while, there is one thing in common between the UK and the US, as you told me, which is, we have, one day a year to honor veterans? We have two, right? Memorial Day and Veterans Day. But in the UK, it's one, unless it's a World War II memorial, right? Like during World War II, they do a bunch of memorials.
Remembrance Sunday, which is November the 11th. They've rolled that all into one to remember and support veterans, all those that served or gave the ultimate sacrifice.
Yeah, that's kind of I find that to be very troubling from politicians who never a day in their life had to put on a uniform to determine, like, we're going to honor the people who we just blatantly sent to war or whatever with one day a year. But then we'll give, cancer awareness a whole month. Not dismissing cancer awareness, right?
Yeah.
Both are very important, but it's also very important to honor our veterans, and I hope that's what I'll be able to do on this series for the month, and hopefully start a trend that every November becomes a Veteran November. So tell our audience a little bit, Yousif, what branch of the military did you serve and how long you were enlisted for and so forth?
Yeah, sure. I joined the British Army. I was in the Army for 10 years. So during that time, I served in the Household Cavalry, which is, I guess, the equivalent of your Cav Scouts. During that time, I was a frontline soldier, deployed on various operations. But then, after leaving the Army in 2007, I think it was, a long time ago now, I went back out to the Middle East to do private security as well.
So you just, after 10 years, you needed to go back to the desert. I mean, most people leave and really never want to go back. So what made you go back? Was the money that good?
Hey, it had to be, Yeah, the money was good. The climate's good. That's about it.
I mean, as beautiful as England is, I think most people don't know that when there's sunshine in England, any day of the week, people stop everything they're doing and they go to the park and they start tanning in the park. It's fascinating. I remember being in London one time, and it was like a summery May day. It was like summer outside. It was May, and people were out. The parks were just full of people. This was pre-COVID, folks, when humans could still interact with other humans. And people were tanning. People had their shirts off. Girls were in bikinis in the park tanning. They're like, sun.
Yeah. Well, hey, we get about 4 days of sun a year. And
so did you study cyber in the military, or was that after you left?
No, that was after I left. Yeah. So I when I was out in the Middle East, actually working as a security consultant, private contractor, whatever you want to call it, we had a lot of clients, or I came across a lot of clients that, they were, hey, what's this about the physical security or the physical aspect? And then as the threat landscape evolved, not just in the Middle East, but in Europe and back home, started getting more questions about, hey, well, we're safe physically, but what about our data? What about things that we're sending to each other or discussing? How can we keep that safe? And it was quite a revelation for me because, from our background, we very much specialise in the physical aspect of security. But I noticed immediately these similarities, and we spoke before about when you join the military and you're in a frontline unit, it's very much drilled into you defence in depth, perimeter security, all these different aspects of of security, and then we're also talking about the classification system. Hey, we've lived and breathed that, right?
Right.
So it wasn't a huge shift in mentality for me to go down that route, and I guess I started my journey down there I started with 27001, their lead implementer, just to get my mind in that space, and I did various qualifications after that, and I'm now a CISM. But yeah, sure. I mean, it was, but like I said, the whole journey, I didn't see that much of a change from the military aspect to the civilian and the information security stuff.
That's very interesting. I think I've spoken to so many veterans. Very few come from combat to cyber. And I agree with your thought process, right? If you understand military perimeter security and convoy security, I mean, if you think of data transferring from one place to another, I mean, if you were a combat soldier or you served with combat units, you realize like combat security along the route is no different than your data going from point A to point B and securing it. You go, well, where are all the places where someone could possibly intercept my data, or someone could possibly intercept our convoy and lead to a battle where we're maybe at a disadvantage, or could disable us, or could delay us, or could cause a loss of life. There's a lot of resemblance to that. That's very, very bright of you to say. Very bright, because I think for people who are in combat, who are listening to this podcast right now and going like, why, I'm a guy with a gun. Like, I don't know how to code. Did you need to learn how to code?
No. I think with my journey, especially again with the thinking behind it, of going back and touching on what we just spoke about, but disaster recovery, business continuity, all these aspects of of cyber resilience and things like that. It's exactly the same as the human aspect or the physical aspect. So what I took from the military to make me, I suppose, advance through this cyber career was what I found really interesting was a lot of people in the real world, I say the real world, I still call it the real world, civilian world, very much are almost protective of their role or protective of themselves. And I come from a team background. So you know what, if what you do in your job, regardless of status, rank, structure, whatever, if you've got a good point, you're going to tell me and I'm going to take that on board. And if I don't, then hey, I'm a jerk.
Yeah, I mean, so cyber is very much for I mean, again, this is such a great episode, Yousif, and thank you for volunteering to come on the podcast and talk about this, because this one hits dear to my heart. I mean, I was 35 Lima in the military, which is human intel, but I really wanted to be 13 Bravo, which is, a tanker, artillery. I wanted to blow shit up. That's how they recruited me into the military. I was a little bit younger. They started recruiting me when I was 16. You joined when you were 16 years old. The Queen's Majesty service does not discriminate on age. Once you can drive, you can shoot a gun, and you can go to war. Sure. But when I really, really, really wanted to be artillery, very much so. And when I took the ASVATs, which is the American version of your competency test, to realize really what MOS is, meaning what jobs would best fit you, they were like, hey, you speak languages and you're like way, I don't want to say too smart, but you've got other skills that we want to utilize somewhere else. So yeah, you can blow shit up. We'll make that kind of like a backup MOS, but really we want you to be Intel. And so when I hear of people in artillery or people in cavalry or people in the front line kind of coming into cyber, and on the GRC side. So, incident response, governance, risk, and compliance. That's brilliant, because that's a perfect place for people that come with the mindset of incident responsive, being quick on their feet, of not being stressed under pressure, of being able to handle that. That's where they will excel in cyber.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you've hit on a really good point there as well, that I guess from working throughout the Middle East and various other countries, and interacting with local people and understanding that human intelligent aspect, that human intelligence and human risk in cyber is almost as prevalent as technical risk.
Right.
If we can understand the thinking and the economic and the political reasons behind things, we can better secure ourselves. And again, that's exactly the same as what we would do if we were going into a country for a physical war. We'd get that background. We'd start thinking in that way. How can we win the hearts and minds, but in reverse for cyber?
Yeah, you're spot on. Which is, so much of cyber is human and not computer, right? People think of botnets and ransomware, and I'm like, well, just think of a human who's trying to break into a fort.
Yeah.
Right. And think of that as being in computer terms, and the fort being your network, the fort being your IT landscape and infrastructure and architecture. And the key, what they're trying to get to, where, in military terms, we want to plant our flag. Well, they want to plant their flag on your data. And so, there's so many similarities to that. Let me ask you this. Is the challenge in transitioning from military to civilian difficult in the UK? Meaning, is it hard to find a job thereafter? Is there a stigma around veterans in the UK similar to the stigma that exists in the US?
Yeah, very much so. I think we're starting to see a slight transition in that now. But sure, when I left, it was very much either people didn't know what you did in the military, or they thought you were just someone that kicked a door in, or you're a bit stupid, or whatever. And yeah, great. If we need somebody over here that's going to be, that's going to work all day on a building site, that's the guy. Who's going to drive a lorry? That's the guy. But I think what we're seeing now is a transition, and rightfully so, that the rank structure in the British Army, as a Lance Corporal, for instance, you could be a Lance Corporal at 19 years old, and you could be managing, just use a civilian term, managing 6, 7, 10 people in critical tasks, critical security tasks. So why are we not nurturing those people in that, with their understanding of physical security and management of people, and bringing these controls in place and this extra education and awareness? I've come across really, really qualified, really technically savvy people that can't work with other people, and the whole thing falls down. So for me, transitioning for me was a learning curve, in terms of you have to almost rethink how to speak, the words that you say. You got to be careful of people's feelings a lot more. But yeah, it was difficult, man. It was really difficult, and I've been out 13 years and it's still difficult.
Yeah, that's it's a lot of veterans here go through the same kind of challenge. A very interesting statistic was, in Los Angeles, 65% of the homeless population is veterans.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, we've got a huge veteran homeless problem in the UK, and I think that where we struggle to fit in, and I hate to say this, but yeah, we do struggle to fit in because, let's take information security and cyber, for instance. Say there's an incident going on, we disregard the clock. We're there, we're present, and we're going to see this through. And if that means, hey, let's walk out of here at sun up and go for a coffee, but we've done it and we can all high five outside. Whereas I think, a lot of the civilian population, and I'm not, broad brushing people, but hey, it gets to 5 o'clock. Well, I finished.
Yeah. The work ethic, the dedication, and I think the stamina, right? Like basic training, beyond teaching you how to do push-ups and run all of those are meant to develop a kind of stamina that you never lose, no matter how fat and bald you get as a veteran, right? Or no matter what you go through, that stamina still is still a part of what you do. So let me ask you this. Tell us a little bit about what you're doing today. You're obviously a CISO. Was it kind of, did you mature to the CISO role? And what was that process like?
Yeah, sure. So for myself, I started off obviously in the physical security arena, but then I moved to risk management. So I got quite a few qualifications and studied academia en route to being a risk manager and understanding risk. And then the information security stuff. And then I became an information security manager at a global company, which was really, really good, really great, opened my eyes to a lot of stuff. But what I found was what carried me through, maybe, there were people there that had done longer or understood it better, but they didn't have, I guess, that veteran mentality that we have. That, if I don't understand something in a meeting today, I'm going to go away, I'm going to learn it. And next time I'm going to tell you how it is. If you ask me a question, sure, I'm going to say, hey, leave it with me to the end of the day and I'll get back to you. And I'll get back to you with the proper answer. Whereas I think a lot of people around you sort of are quite happy to go, well, that's not my job, or I'm not sure. So by having that sort of veteran mentality or that military mentality, I very quickly progressed. And it was, and I guess, I could go into a meeting and, what we're used to is day in, day out, there's somebody on your team or a team, the company's a team in my eyes, regardless of department. But, somebody on the team says, hey, we're struggling with this. Well, if we've got spare resource or we've got spare time, let's jump in it together, even if it's not my job, let's fix it. Whereas I think everyone else around me was that's a separate budget. That's somebody else's problem. And that doesn't work for me. That's not who we are. So I guess that propelled me forward in terms of career, where I got a good name. I got a lot of support from higher up, and also through leadership, I got a lot of support from people that I was responsible for. It just naturally progressed then into that CISO role.
That's how long did it take? How long did that journey take you to become a CISO, from the moment you entered Infosec until the moment you had the official title of Chief Information Security Officer? How long in years was that journey?
I guess 5.5 years.
See, and that's, I think for a lot of people to kind of take that in, that's really doable. And I think that's a really fast path, by the way, that shows a lot of dedication and desire from your end to really kind of master InfoSec. I had on Kurt John, who's the CSO for Siemens, and he was a pen tester in 2010, and he's been a CISO for, I think, about 3 years now, so 4 years, just about. So It took him about 6 years to do that journey, and Kurt's brilliant, very similar to you. I mean, same mindset of, kind of stepping outside the box of the traditional IT and starting to look at cyber as really what it is, which is a chess match, which is, you can look at a map and realize where things are happening. And you can look at a map of a network and also realize, oh, we've got 7 APIs for this one data set. Well, here's a problem. Let's talk about that for a minute, because, I personally feel if it wasn't for COVID this year, API would have been the biggest threat vector in cyber. But I think COVID brought phishing and denial of service back and kind of postponed the attack on APIs.
Yeah, and I think, that what COVID has done is brought that economic risk in, that, people are losing their jobs, people are, are falling on hard times. So with the phishing campaigns, etc. And I'm not just saying, hey, the people who are doing these phishing operations are good people that have fallen down on the luck. I'm not saying that at all, but it's going to add to that. It's going to add to, people with a technical understanding are going to start looking for money elsewhere.
Well, if you think of how these threat actors operate, right? If I know that let's take this to combat terms and we'll translate it into cyber. Yeah. I'm liking this conversation because you might be one of the only people I can have this conversation with. Right. But if I know that there's a list of people that can give me information that can help me win my war, right, that can help me infiltrate more organizations, right, I'm going after that piece of data. So if that data is somewhere on base, I'm going to try to infiltrate the base, whether it be through the local trucking company that's authorized to drive on base to bring supplies, and I'm going to gather some data, or whether it be through a surprise attack or 500 other ways that I can really infiltrate to grab data. Well, what COVID has done is it's created a level of panic, and it's created a level of awareness and a level of where people who are doing well in COVID, meaning they still have a job, they're still able to work, want to help the people who are less fortunate because they're part of our community. And that's what community is all about, right? If 50% of your community falls on hard time, you no longer have a community, you now have a division of wealth. And that's not always something positive for your community, because typically either those houses get foreclosed on and then your property value goes down, and then there's a snowball effect that's very hard to stop once it starts, or you support your community. And so we want to help, and the threat actors take advantage of that with phishing emails that lure you to click on a bad link, that lure you to download a malicious document, that lure the human as a whole wants to help.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, what I always tell my team is, don't just look at the threats as a one-dimensional thing. That everybody that's on the other end of that computer, everyone's on the other end of that plan or that campaign, they have a story, they have a motivation. And if we don't try and start thinking, it goes back to the military, think like the terrorist, think
right,
like the bad guy. And once you start putting yourself in those shoes and think, hey, I've got to feed my kids. Well, if I've got to feed my kids, nothing's going to stop me. Right. So if you can understand that mindset and then look at what you do as a company or an organization, whatever you do, and if you see something that could be of value to somebody else, then you've got to protect that, and you've got to use that mentality to protect that.
Yeah, you've got to find a way to build up your defenses and really build a plan around your data, your community. And we see that a lot right now. I think there's being October's National Cybersecurity Awareness Month, right? And we're kind of at the tail end of it. You speaking, it's October. We're pre-recording. Everyone knows I'm pre-recording these episodes, and if they don't, they just found out. Cybersecurity Awareness Month to me is outreach not within our community, it's outreach to people who aren't cyber savvy. Right? It's going out to speak to the elderly, to young parents who are giving their kids smartphones at the age of 7. That to me is mind-boggling. Like my kids, I've got one daughter who's 15. She's already in the social media world. But I'll tell you one thing, my next set of kids, they ain't touching a phone till they're 18. Like they'll have a phone, but they're not having any social media accounts until they leave my house and go to college. But at no point in time are they going to get screen time.
No, and I think this is one of the most interesting things about, I guess, our industry is that, you speak to some of the people that operate at a higher level within cyber and information security, and they are almost like Luddites in what they do in their private life. If they don't have to have technology, they won't. And yeah, I can totally see that 100%. I think cyber security outreach and information security outreach and sharing that awareness is key, because what got me into this is I'd been around, I'd been overseas, I'd done a lot of things. And this was the first thing that scared me in a long time. And that's what sort of gripped me. And if that can grip me, that can grip 1,000 other people. And I almost, did a full 180 in the way that I looked at the world when I started to get into information security and cybersecurity.
Well, because, when I think the one thing about cyber that a lot of people don't comprehend, and I think this is something a lot of CISOs miss when they communicate with their boards, when they communicate with their superiors, is we talk in data terms. And data isn't something that you and I can feel. It's not something you and I can have emotion to. Because what is data? For most people, if you ask them what is data, they'll tell you it's an Excel sheet. It's my Salesforce database. Can you hear me better now? Sorry, folks. We're the Dolphins. Darn Dolphins.
It sounds like the feedback on your mind. There we go.
There we are. Yeah. So what I was saying was, most people see. I had a train of thought, and I think I lost my train of thought because we got really confused. I lost my train of thought because of that. Oh man. What was I talking about? Now I wish I had a producer.
It was about how you describe data.
Right, we talk data. CISOs, we talk data a lot. But if we started talking finance, if we started talking robbery, if we started talking in terms that people can comprehend, I think security would be viewed very differently within organizations. The idea of a record costing $400 in a data breach is BS. The record costs $400 because you got to report that record, and that's the lawyer fee to report a record, right? Yeah. There's very little value in data. Most threat actors today are after money. And if we comprehend that, and if we let that kind of sink in, and then you go, we're in the midst of the largest battle to stop the greatest transfer of wealth in human history.
100%.
And if we have that conversation, we will win our battle with security, we'll win our battle with budget, we'll win our battle with legal not authorizing you to work with the federal government or your local government on security because they think it's too big of a risk, that if they know what you're doing, that they can come and sue you when that's not really their role. They're not,
Sure.
Like that changes the conversation, and that doesn't always happen.
Yeah, exactly. And I think how I've operated in this area is I'm very much gone to each stakeholder. Hey, if I'm talking to someone in finance, someone in operations, I'm going to show them how that's going to stop. So it's how we communicate these things, and I think that's critical in terms of if you're telling somebody that's on the shop floor that this is going to have this impact, they don't care. If you're telling the board member this is happening, they're going to listen. If you're going to tell somebody on the operations front, the risk here is that you're not going to finish this project, and therefore it's going to impact you, your job, because we didn't listen to this risk. They're going to listen. It's just finding that area. Like when I was saying, for me, when I started, finding out cyber did genuinely scare me. You had my attention.
Yeah. I'm loving this conversation with you, Yousif, but we're almost out of time. So let me ask you my final question, my sign-off question for every interview. What's one thing you loved about your military service?
One thing I loved?
Yes.
Oh, there's so many. The one thing I loved, the travel. And the brotherhood. That's two, I know.
Travel, that's okay. You can enjoy both. Travel and brotherhood. I think brotherhood's been a consistent one. Travel, I think for a lot of people who enlist is also a very big one. And yeah, that's things to love about your service. We'll obviously see behind you. Are those all your medals? Behind you?
Those are on the left, and then my granddad's on the right from World War II.
Wow. Amazing. So I want to say, Yousif, thank you for coming on the podcast and sharing your story. And this has been such an insightful conversation from combat to cyber. I think that is, for any person who's in combat, who's listening, and they go, listen, I'm not a keyboard guy. You don't have to be a keyboard guy. You have to be a strategic guy. And if you're in strategic, we need you in cyber, because cyber is so much strategy and so very little to do with the keyboard. Not dismissing the keyboard folks. We obviously definitely need red teamers, blue teamers, purple teamers, CTI guys. We need all of them. but strategy is just as important. And so join us in those ranks. Yousif, thank you for coming on across the pond. Folks, that's it for another one in the books. We'll have more episodes tomorrow, each and every single day, 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for the entire month of November, Sunday through Friday. Saturdays, the Sabbath, we rest. But we'll be back with so much more on every single day this week. Until then, folks, thanks so much for tuning in. Stay healthy. Stay cyber safe.
Make sure to subscribe to our podcast and share it with your friends and colleagues. And get all the latest information at cyberhubpodcast.com.